You're listening to a Reykjavik Grapevine podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the almost completely true history of Iceland, the podcast, season 2, the last Viking mystery, episode 3, Life and Death in Greenland. I'm your host, Trausti.
And I am Valur and Gunnarsson.
And we're here standing on a boat.
We're on a boat.
Welcome to the boat.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever had a hobby that kind of goes out of hand? Because we're standing on one of those. There's a guy who in the 90s decided he would now, for a hobby, build a replica of a Viking ship from the, I guess, 10th century.
It is actually a replica of the Grapevine ship in Norway, which is in the museum now, which is from the time of Harald Fairhair.
All right, so it's pretty old.
Yeah, it's about as old as Iceland is.
Yes. Well, population in Iceland. Or living in Iceland, sorry.
Life in Iceland.
Life in Iceland.
And Gunnar, the guy who made it, he is actually something like a 30th generation descendant of Leifur, like most of us are.
Yeah.
Of Leifur Eiríksson, discoverer of Greenland. So he, maybe it was just the old genes kicking in, like he just started going out to the shed and building stuff, and then eventually he had a whole Viking ship.
Which he then subsequently took to North America.
Yeah, in the year 2000.
To commemorate...
The year 1000.
Which is to commemorate Leifur Eiríksson supposedly finding and losing North America.
Yeah, even for a humanities person, that's pretty easy math. Like,
yeah.
What's 2 times 1000? I could figure that out.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But the ship, if I'm not mistaken, could potentially carry between 50 and 70 people.
Yeah.
It is a massive thing, pretty much. I mean, like I said, imagine a hobby going that out of hand, because this is a big thing. You can't only just build the ship, you first have to build the shed to build the ship in. This is...
because weather can be bad.
Yeah, so this is an astonishing thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's been sitting here for the past 10, 15 years, I can't really remember. We didn't check, but we're in a museum in the town of Keflavik, near to the airport, which is called Vikingaheimar or Viking World. Mm-hmm. And this is where the ship can be visited for a fee.
Yeah.
An entrance fee.
One thing you notice is that there are no chairs here, which was accurate. They didn't have benches to row, so everyone would bring along their own box or their own chest with all their valuables and all the things that they would need for the trip, and then they would sit on the box and row.
So if you sign up to be a rower on a battleship heading out for a battle somewhere, and you don't bring a chest, or you bring something like an empty chest, do you think people would have been suspicious of your allegiance? You're not really staking all your belongings on the venture?
Yeah, I can sort of see the rune carving somewhere. Go out, experience the world, murder harmless monks, bring your own chest.
Yeah, I mean there is, when it comes to these boats and getting on them and going out raiding, as would have been the purpose of a similar boat like this. I mean, it's a trading vessel. It's a place to get. It's a vessel to get between places, but it was also used to be Viking-y.
Yeah, because the Knurr, they were deeper and they were more for just trading. Yeah, but this is an actual long ship.
This is a long ship. This is a fighting ship.
Yeah.
Even though it's very sort of seaworthy, it's still in its essence a fighting ship.
And then they were pretty stable because they're sort of flat, and they could, as they did in the east, in Russia and Ukraine, you could actually carry them from river to river. So they do well in open seas, but also in rivers and sort of not deep water.
This is what also made the Vikings such a massive scourge of Western Europe, because they could sail up any river and then just completely boycott all defenses that way, and then raid the city on the river, because all the major cities would be on the river or by the ocean. Mm-hmm. So they would be it would be open hunting season.
You never saw them coming.
Never saw them coming. But eventually, like the Franks in France, they would they started like building these almost like barricades on the rivers to deal with the Vikings sailing up the Seine and looting Paris.
Let's not talk about that, it just makes me sad.
Yeah, anyway.
Vikings were massive.
But I mean, these ships were like maybe the largest part of what we identify with Vikings, and I guess what they have identified with themselves as Vikings to an extent. I remember the first and the only poem my grandmother taught me was straight out of Egil Saga, and it is the poem that Egil's mother tells to him as sort of like a guidance to his life, and it goes like það mælti, or he's saying what his mother said to him, and he says, and it goes like this: það mælti mín móðir að mér skildi kaupa fley og færar árar, halda á brott með víkingum, standa upp í stafni, stýra dýrum knerri, halda svo til hafnar, höggva mann og annan. Roughly translated, I should go on a boat, I should go a Viking, I should come ashore and I should kill a man.
Yeah, actually many men. It's
I'm toning it down here.
Yeah, the original Norse was well recited. It sounds better. But yeah, I mean, you were supposed to sort of, if you were a young man and you should go out, you should see the world, explore it, kill some people there, bring back some goodies, and then settle down maybe. But yeah, the captain of the ship didn't necessarily know so much about sailing. He was just the guy who owned the ship. Yeah. He was the money. So they would have a leiðsögumaður who was the actual pilot, and he would do the piloting. So he'd be standing here, and he would know where to go. And they had, their system of navigation is not completely understood. No. There's a story of Ravenfloki, who discovered Iceland by using birds, by using ravens that he would who cannot land on the water, and therefore he would... If they didn't come back, they must have found land. So and you can go in that general direction. Yeah. And in Landnámabók, there is actually a kind of an interesting description, the Book of Settlements, a description of how to get to Greenland. So you sail from Norway, you should see Shetlands on your left at some point, and then you should see the Faroe Islands. They should be like this tall coming out of the sea. You shouldn't see Iceland, because if you see Iceland, you're too far north, but you should see birds sort of flying out of Iceland. And on that topic of navigating and descriptions to navigate by, we're obviously living like in the 10th, 12th century. There are no pictures per se. You only have like a verbal description of things. And this is why in the sagas there are often lengthy character descriptions, and they don't really resonate with modern readers because they're just so complex, and they don't really tell you anything because you're not used to thinking that way, because you're used to pictures. But we remember from a previous episode when Bjarni Herjólfsson got lost and found America, but didn't go ashore. And on a side note, I still hold a grudge against my 6th grade teacher for giving me a wrong answer for saying that Bjarni Herjólfsson also found America. He did, though he didn't go ashore. No, well, maybe your teacher was a Eirik Saga kind of guy, because in that story it's only Leifur, but in Grænlendinga Saga it's actually Bjarni Herjólfsson. But yeah, you should have told him that. But in Grænlendinga Saga there is, Bjarni knows he's not in Greenland. He's never been in Greenland before, but like you were talking about the descriptions in Landnáma, it's been described to him and he knows that's not it. So that was a very important part of navigating, was to like know the signs of both the things you can see in terms of land, but also to absorb like the ocean. It's probably its color, its warmth, its I don't know what you call this, the tracts, and the seabirds and the cloud formations. Yeah, not only did you have to know where to go, but you also had to know if you weren't where you were supposed to be. Yeah, which is also a good indicator of you are not now on the road traveled, you are off the road, so to speak. But that takes us back to Greenland. So I guess we should talk a little bit more about life in Greenland. Yeah, and post settling. And we have one saga for that. We do have one saga for that. Let's talk about that. So we're now in the front of the boat. We didn't have the budget to go to Greenland to talk about life in Greenland, but from the view here, we have another saga to talk about, which is Fóstbræðra Saga. Just imagine we're sailing out to Greenland. Yeah. After the two Vinland sagas, which we talked about before, this is the next great, and it's almost the last great saga set in Greenland.
And it's what would be the translation? Blood Brothers, or?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the official translation, but I would go with that.
So it's a saga about two, let's say, pretty avid killers.
Yeah, they're sort of very bloody blood brothers. It's in the settlement saga, which about Ingólfur and Hjörleifur, the first Icelanders. They actually, when you imagine, blood brothers, you imagine people slitting their wrists and sort of putting them next to each other.
Like this, the rubbing it.
Now you have hepatitis C too, or whatever was going around. It's not very hygienic.
I don't know what you have, but I don't have anything.
Well, if we became blood brothers, you'd find out.
Right.
But no, they would actually dig a hole, and then they would put their blood into the hole. Yes. And then they would mix it together. So they would mix their blood, but not literally into each other, but on a
so
place.
So they would mix it into the soil.
Yeah.
So that would be the ritual.
Soil. Yeah.
But these are two characters named Þorgeir and Þormóður, both named after the thunder, god of thunder.
As was the custom at the time.
And there's a lot of poems. There's a lot of killing.
Yeah.
But there's still, if I remember correctly, a bit of a distinction between the two Thor prefixes. Þorgeir is more of a sort of killing grunt who is very sort of entrenched in the old ways.
Yeah.
And Þormóður is more like I'm not going to say a Lord Byronish, but sort of like a more romantic figure.
Yeah,
he's more of a womanizer. He's the poet of the Thor.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of killing. And these killings and poems sort of tend to accompany each other. There's often a poem about the killing, seemingly impromptu, which is not probably the case. It's in many cases kind of funny. There are really weird scenes in that book, like when I can't remember which one of the two is hanging off a cliff by a plant, but he's too proud to ask his blood brother for help, so he just hangs on there for a long time before his brother notices him and pulls him out.
This is long before the era when men refused to ask for directions when driving. They would also not ask for help when they're hanging off a cliff.
Yes. I guess not asking for directions is an aspect of this behavior.
Yes.
There's also another really weird scene in this book where Þorgeir kills a man. Which in itself is not newsworthy, but the man is simply he's a shepherd. He is short of breath. He's standing in the field with a few other guys, and he's leaning on his staff, sort of with his head and neck tilted forward. And Þorgeir is passing by and sees his neck sort of with the sun glistening on it, and just takes his axe out and chops his head off. And subsequently, when questioned about his actions, he was like, it was just so easy to hit.
Yeah.
And that was his whole reason for that killing.
Lá vel við höggi. We still say that to this day when we take a pot shot at someone. He was just such an easy target.
He was such an easy target, that's the good translation. He was such an easy target.
The original is better. But the story begins in Iceland, and Þorgeir seems to be a really bad influence on Þormóður. So he's the one who's always getting them to go out killing. But Þormóður goes along with it, but after a while, Þorgeir sort of very sinisterly asks, so shouldn't we just find out which one of us is the strongest? And Þormóður sort of takes the hint. He doesn't really want to find out. Goes to live with his father. But then, as it happens, a man by the nickname of Trölli, the troll, which is called Trölli, who is the second most powerful man in Greenland.
Yes.
And Einarsfjörður, the most powerful people in Greenland are the people in Brattahlíð, in Eiríksfjörður, descendants of Eirik the Red. But this is the other fjord, and he's been out trading in Denmark, Norway, England. He's on his way back. He's quite a lot of wealth. He drops by in Iceland, and he kills Þorgeir. I mean, there are so many reasons to kill Þorgeir, but he goes ahead and does it, and then continues on his way to Greenland.
There's a tiny bit of a side story to that killing, because it happens in northeast Iceland. the part of Iceland that is closest to the Arctic Circle, I think, and they have like an Arctic Circle sort of rock monument there. And Þorgeir's sort of days, as they called graves in pagan times, is still there, allegedly. But there's like this really weird part, like I don't know what you call this in sort of proper terms in terms of novels and stuff like that, but there's this character who just pops up right there. His only purpose is to report the killing at the Althing, which is, I don't know, 500-600 kilometers away. And this guy's name is Helgi Selseista. So Helgi, seal testicle, like singular, which is also, I have questions about that. And
do the seals even have testicles?
I
in the land of the no testicle seals, the one testicle seal is king.
I have no idea. This is very.
They have them somewhere.
Yeah, but whatever. Like, but this is one of the sort of like the funny elements to the story, and this guy's only purpose in the story is to run to Alþingi on the other side of Iceland, 500 kilometers away, show up there short of breath to tell everybody Þorgeir is dead. And then he's out of the story.
But he has a memorable name.
He has a very memorable name.
There's a lot of memorable names in this saga, and we will get to those as we move along.
But trying to get back on track, subsequent to the killing, Þormóður, who is still alive, goes out to Greenland to avenge his...
Yeah, even though he doesn't really like Þorgeir very much, he is a blood brother, so he's honor bound to avenge him. He even goes all the way to Norway to Olaf the Fat, who is king, who say later be known as Saint Olaf, to get his permission, and then it's fine, and then he goes to Greenland. But instead of going straight away to Einarfjörður to murder Trölli, he actually goes to Brattahlíð.
The main place.
Yeah, which we talked about before. And this is so interesting because this is by now the third generation. So the chieftain now is Þorkell Leifsson, who is son of Leifur Eiríksson. And
grandson to Eiríkur Rauði. All right, so we're in the third generation.
Yeah, and this is roughly the 1020s. We don't really know what happened to Leifur, but we can sort of assume that he became the chieftain. After all, both his brothers are dead, his sister is ostracized, and he probably dies in his 50s, like his father did.
Probably due to robust living.
I mean, he seems to be a clean-cut guy. Who knows? There's so many things that can kill you in medieval Greenland.
Yes.
So Þormóður spent the winter there, but he does have something of a reputation of a ladies' man. And this Lady Sigrún seems to be spending a lot of time in his company. This annoys her husband, who has another interesting name, Loðinn.
Hairy.
Yeah, or furry.
Furry.
And this resonates with people of my generation because in 1977 there was a little movie came out called Stjörnustríð, or
Star Wars.
Yeah, that's the original title.
For those who've heard of that movie.
Yeah. And at the same time, there was a picture book in Icelandic for Stjörnustríð, and one of the main characters was called Loðinn. Chewbacca. So yeah, he is sort of the Chewbacca of Iceland. And then there was a character called Svarthöfði or Blackhead.
Yeah, but that guy, Darth Vader, that guy is from a different side, from the Sturlunga side.
Yeah, and he was actually a real person.
He was also an actual badass.
Yeah, well, unlike the other Darth Vader.
The other one is fictional.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, ours is real.
Yeah, right.
And then there were the Jedi. They were called Væringjar or Varangians, like these Vikings of the East. So they did sort of make an Icelandic saga out of Star Wars, which
is kind of cool.
Yeah. So that's what we grew up on.
Excellent translations. That's what we grew up on.
Yeah, I miss those. So inevitably, there's a Christmas party, everyone is drunk, Loðinn has a job of carrying up everybody's, this is Chewbacca, has a job of carrying up everybody's weapons so nobody gets hurt during the partying. But then he and Þormóður come to blows. Þormóður is sort of helped out, but then it turns out he has hidden an axe on himself. So just when everyone is leaving, he chops poor Loðin in the head. And that's the end of him.
Do you think it was like a pocket axe or?
They had all different shapes and sizes, but apparently it was pretty easy to conceal axes because there were different instances of this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it happened a lot. Yeah, people had cloaks on too.
Yeah.
Sometimes so it's easier, but he does not stop at that. He
no, he's just starting.
He's just starting because it's been a while since I read this one, a long while, but what it sort of consolidated down to in my memory, this Greenland part of Þormóður avenging his brother and quotation marks Þorgeir is just like basically killing people, busting rhymes. That's all I remember.
Yeah, it's pretty gangster. And then finally he goes over to Einarsfjörður, and there when the annual thing is held, and Trölli, he's one of the big men of Greenland, he comes to a retinue, starts telling everyone a story, and then it starts to rain, and Þormóður is just waking up, and he goes out, he visits Trölli, and he, when Trölli asks him who he is, he even lies about his name, which is not the proper thing to do.
No.
And to add injury to insult, he cleaves his head into with an axe, probably the same axe, it goes well in pocket. And then when people come in, he says, "Oh, somebody killed Trölli. I didn't see him, but here I am holding him up. And can you help me hold him up?" And then people come and hold up Trölli with his sort of head cleft in two, while Þormóður goes out to look for the killer. And I think to 13th century Icelanders, this was sort of the height of comedy.
There is, so that is hilarious. But there is so for the longest time, and this, the sagas were taken extremely seriously.
Yeah.
They were taken extremely seriously by lay people. They were taken extremely seriously by academics.
Yeah.
And if it was in the 1960s, our only Nobel Prize winner, Halldór Laxness, wrote, was it in the 30s? 50s, sorry. Yeah. He wrote a spoof version of this saga called Gerpla, where he kind of makes fun of the whole thing, and he got a lot of flack for that back in the day. But I remember an interview with him years later where he was saying it was astonishing and incomprehensible to me that people in academia and lay people did not see the humor of the saga, which is just outright ridiculous in many aspects along the way. It must have been entertainment. Yeah. And just people would have been rolling around laughing. And he was just basically looking at it that way, as nobody seemed to have done in his century, and using that as a way to create a whole novel based on that thing.
Gerpla, the Happy Warriors. I mean, it goes on and after Þormóður, people eventually realized that it was he who killed Trölli, and of course he's outlawed, he goes to hide in a hole, but then he comes into conflict with the sons of the sister of Trölli, and there's a fight, and eventually the biggest one and Þormóður topple off a cliff, and they're in the sea. And then Þormóður pulls down the guy's pants so he can't use his legs for swimming, and his face freezes into a smile and he drowns. And I mean, pulling people's pants down, I mean, that's the height of comedy.
Yeah, so it's like a Marx Brothers thing. It's like a very sort of classic joke, slapstick thing.
Nothing funnier for the last 1,000 years.
Yeah, but I mean, eventually the killing ends. He gets out of Greenland. Yeah,
he's killed Trölli, he's killed his nephews. He wants to go on killing the more extended family, but he just gets speared in the leg, so he eventually decides enough is enough, I'll just go.
Old school arrow to the knee.
Yeah. But he survives, and he just decides to go back.
But he eventually ends up in Norway and fights with King Ólafur and dies at Stiklastaðir in 1030, I think.
Yeah.
And I guess in that sense there's like this contrast between the two Thor prefixes, Þormóður and Þorleifur. One of them is sort of like this unreformed Þorgeir.
Thor's spear, which is sort of mixing gods, but yeah.
So the Þorgeir is like this unreformed pagan who lives and dies as one, and dies brutally. Þormóður kind of moves towards Christianity, fights on the good side. He still dies, but he sort of does in a good cause.
He dies with Saint Olaf for Christianity. There's no more
yeah,
noble death than that.
Because it's at this junction which a lot of this story is about, between Christianity and paganism, and this is sort of like the morality to the story is that you can turn to the right direction, and if you don't, you'll die a sinful pagan and be forever forgotten, or you can seek. You can fight on the right side and receive redemption.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the end of that story. That's the end of the saga.
That's the end of that period in Greenlandic history that we know about. Þorkell, who is this time still a young man, it looks like, and unmarried. We don't know if he has any children, but this is the last we hear of Brattahlíð for almost the next 100 years.
Yes. We're back off the boat, we're on solid ground. We're standing in front of a church, a stone church, which in this country is a rarity. At least prior to the 19th century. This one was built in the late 19th century. Prior to that, the oldest stone churches in Iceland are about from the 18th century, and prior to that we probably had some stone churches, like in the monastery of Þingeyrar and elsewhere, but those all got torn down during the Reformation. And this sets us apart from our neighbours in the Faroe Islands and in Greenland, which both places have stone churches from the Middle Ages. This church is called Hvaleyrarkirkja. We're just west of Leifur Eiríksson Airport, or Keflavík Airport, commonly known. And I guess because we don't have the budget to go to Greenland, this is the next best thing. But there are more connections here.
Yeah, well, this is actually the 5th church that's built here. The first one was in the 1100s. The stone is from the area around here. Mm-hmm. So there's no technical reason really why Icelanders wouldn't build stone churches. But I was in Greenland last spring, and the medieval churches there were freakishly big. Mm-hmm. Which is very strange, considering that Icelandic medieval churches were made out of wood, and sadly they've either burnt down or collapsed in an earthquake or something like this.
And stones and turf.
So we don't have them, but then in Greenland you can still see them. And so in 100 years after the events of Fosbræðra saga, in 1124, mm-hmm. Sokki, who's now chieftain of Brattahlíð, petitions the Norwegian king to get his own bishop. Mm-hmm. And they send one. He has to stop in Iceland one winter because he just got in bad weather. And then eventually he comes to Greenland. And they set up a bishopric in Garðar, mm-hmm. which means garden in modern Icelandic, or gardens, but at that time it was more like, grassy area, sort of, fields. Yeah. And and this becomes a really rich place. They build a church there, a cathedral, the Cathedral of St. Nicholas, who is the patron saint of sailors, which is almost as big as the one in Trondheim in Norway. And this is really weird, considering that Greenlanders had at its peak at maximum 5,000 people, 4,000 to 5,000 people. Iceland had at its best maybe 70,000 people, going down to 50,000 usually. The churches are so much bigger.
Yeah, then makes no sense.
No,
but this kind of begs the question. Like, they must have been rich to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, either that or they had a very unequal class system. Maybe we'll get to later. But yeah, it might even be that they were just that much richer. At the time, Iceland exported vaðmál, which is wool.
Wool, yeah, woven wool.
And salt fish, and that was it. But in Greenland, they exported a lot of things. They exported seal hides. Sometimes they exported live polar bears. They also exported sheep and products from ox. But mainly they exported two things. One of them was narwhal tusks.
Oh, ooh, unicorn horns.
Because unicorns, and everybody is looking for a unicorn in those days too. And these were marketed from the people of the green place called Greenland had unicorn horns, and these were very popular, and they were hard to get even in Greenland, but these were very popular. And the other product is walrus tusks.
Yeah.
Actually, also walrus hides, which were used to make rope, which were essential for Viking ships. One of the reasons they were so sturdy. Mm-hmm. But especially tusks. And when there was little ivory coming out of Asia due to various conflicts, then these were the things. I guess
maybe the Mongol hordes.
Yeah, for a while. But actually, then the trade improved, and then they were less in demand. But these were highly sought after. In fact, they might be one of the reasons why people moved from Norway to Iceland and then to Greenland, is that in northern Norway the walrus disappeared. See, walrus are very easy to kill to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful towards walruses, but they're not exactly fast moving. If you see them on land, they kind of look like a gigantic hagfish with a couple of saber tooth on and a mustache, and coincidentally, the area we are in now was originally called Romskvalanes, which is the old Icelandic for walrus.
Yeah.
So the name of this church here, or this area where the church is, Hvaleyrarkirkja, probably used to be Romskvaleyrarkirkja.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And there are no walruses here. Yeah. They probably got hunted to extinction within decades of the settlement here.
Yeah, we started that early.
And hence the name kind of drifted out of use.
Yeah, because Valur in Icelandic means whale, and today walrus would be rosting, but that time it was roskvalur, they were seen as whale too. Yeah. And as I was saying, the first time you meet a group of walrus, you can just take your spear and you can just stick them while they look sort of puzzled at you. But they get wise quickly and then they move away. Yeah. So they left northern Norway. Apparently there were a bunch of them here, but then they left Iceland, so people had to go to Greenland and all the way to northern Greenland to hunt them. So that's maybe one of the economic reasons people would settle in Greenland to begin with. Yeah. And there may have been a lot of money coming in through that. Hence, maybe that's why they built the churches. And actually, sadly, the big cathedral at Gardar was mostly torn down by later farmers, and Inuit farmers who were using the stone as quarry. But in Hvalsey,
another whale-related place name.
Yeah, and in southern Greenland, they have a whole church that's almost like people just left. The roof is missing. Yeah, but the rest is in, and it's more impressive than any medieval site we have in Iceland, sadly.
Yeah, we're really short on anything older than the 18th century here.
Yeah.
Give or take.
Although this church is pretty nice.
Yeah, it actually kind of resembles the Parliament House in the way it's built. And it's built in the same decade, I think, in the 1880s or 90s.
There was one other export that both Iceland and Greenland had, which was the deer falcon. Right. Which was a falcon used for hunting by nobility, and they were very good hunters, and they were highly sought after all the time until the French Revolution, when nobility sort of went out of style. Do you know what the deer falcon is called in Icelandic?
Valur.
Do you know why it's called Valur?
Because it's cool. I don't know.
Because it's such a killer that it destroys everything around it. So everything around it becomes a battlefield.
All right.
My name is Valur. What's your name again?
No, we're not doing this segment again. We're not doing it.
You used to sing in the church choir here, didn't you?
Well, I actually played a Christmas concert here when I was 12, because I lived next in the nearby town.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Jondi's biblical name.
Yep. Well, next we'll be talking about
what actually happened to the Greenlanders. Why did they lose all? If they were so rich, what happened? What went wrong?
Keep watching. Since we were in the vicinity, we decided we might use this opportunity to check out the latest volcanic eruption happening, which has been happening nearby Grindavík, but it fizzled out earlier this week, and we are standing here by the road that should normally lead to the Blue Lagoon, which is about a stone's throw here behind us.
Come on, you just wanted to go to the Blue Lagoon, right?
Yeah, right. But currently there's construction here. They're building a new road towards the Blue Lagoon and a new parking lot apparently on top of the completely new lava. So no matter what happens here, the Blue Lagoon must stay open. But anyway, we're gonna try to make this somehow relate to our story about Greenland.
We will, but they're building the barricades. The Blue Lagoon will survive.
Yeah, the Blue Lagoon will survive.
But actually, yeah, it's the lava here is actually from the Middle Ages, the older lava.
The lava we're standing on, yeah.
Yeah, which is the one with snow on it, because snow doesn't stay on the new lava because it's hot. This actually used to be farmland during the settlement period.
Yes.
People would farm, but then there was a volcanic eruption about almost exactly 900 years ago.
Yeah, in the 13th century.
Yeah.
And similar to now, it was a series of eruptions.
Yeah. And they all lasted for about 150 years.
Yes.
So it looks like we might be in for that again. How many eruptions have there been now in the last
I think we've all lost count now,
yeah.
but it feels like somewhere in between 9 and 11. I'm not entirely sure.
I think it's we're getting closer to 20. But yeah, and the first one was in 2021.
2021, and then for the first few ones, you could actually hike to the eruptions. They took place a little further south from here, and they were in an area with roads and pathways, and they were happening in these sort of enclosed valleys where the lava would sort of build up and wouldn't really move out of. So they were kind of safe. This has been more or less this year. These eruptions have been taking place on the same fissure line over here, kind of the east of us.
And of course, this is in where Europe and North America are drifting apart, which explains the whole.
Partly, yes. And these have been closed off because of numerous reasons. First of all, they've all been taking place on the same fissure line, so you have new lava on top of recent lava on top of more recent lava, and there's no scenario where there's a good idea to hike on relatively new lava. It's brittle, you can fall through and burn to death.
Yeah, it might look solid, but it might be just a thin layer on top of the still flowing lava,
Yeah,
until you pop down and then your legs
and lava itself is it insulates really well, so there's a lot of hot lava onto that crust, that thin crust. But also the area is terrible hiking area. It is full of fissures and holes, and this is exactly where you would hide a body if you needed to, and probably people have, we don't know. And on top of that, this used to be a military exercise area in the 50s and the 60s, so there are like unexploded artillery rounds and hand grenades and whatnot to be found in the area too.
Yeah.
So these have been completely closed down.
I believe this is what hikers call an obstacle course.
Yeah, that's a good name for it. But this we can kind of make this relate to Greenland in a way, because during the 12th and 13th century there were numerous eruptions in Iceland. Yeah. And we can date those with pretty good precision because of drilling done in the Greenland glacier. So they drilled holes into the glacier, and they could time, based on ash layers, some of these eruptions that happened in our more famous volcanoes like Hekla and Katla and in Vatnajökull glacier. Yeah. And these eruptions in the 12th and 13th century coincide with a period of cooling in Iceland and in Greenland, which affected let's say the livelihood of the people who were living in the area to the negative.
Yeah, the Greenland glacier can tell us a lot. It, for example, tells us that there was more pollution during the Roman Empire than there was for a long time after.
It's only
revolution.
It's only when the Industrial Revolution really gets going when you see pollution, so that at those levels.
Yeah, and then of course it goes way off the charts. But yeah, and volcanoes have had a huge impact on history that I think around here we've started to think more about lately. There is the volcanic eruption farther away from here, which almost destroyed all of Iceland in its population in 1783, which we made a podcast about.
True.
But there is perhaps the most consequential volcanic eruption took place probably in Mexico in the mid-6th century. And
the jury is still out on the location, but it's probably the 6th century. It is the 6th century, but maybe Mexico. Yeah. But jury is still out.
And this sort of just covered huge parts of the earth in ash. There was frost, there was famine. It more or less ended the remnants of the Roman Empire, which was during at that time. from the east, and it also seems to have destroyed the previous culture in the Nordic countries, and the new culture that came out of that was what we know today, or call today, the Viking culture.
Yeah.
And it may very well be that the story of Ragnarok in Völuspá
and Fimbulvetur,
the long winter, you know, which I guess Game of Thrones sort of goes a bit, but that all these ideas are actually within, you know, ideas that are passed down from the generations to a few hundred years later when they're written down as this idea of the end of the world being, you know, darkness and cold, which the Ragnarok. So what led to the Ragnarok of the Norse Greenlanders? That's what we're going to be looking at next time. And in fact, one of the theories says that there may have been a volcanic eruption involved there too.
In war?
A volcanic eruption that started the beginning of the end of the Greenlandic culture.
Which leads into this cooling period I was talking about before, where like we could live with a degree or two of cooling here, but it had more devastating effects on the Greenlandic settlements.
Yeah. And the closer you are to the edge of civilization, the more you feel the effects of even small changes, which can be huge.
Absolutely.
So, was it climate, or was it something very different, or a combination of the factors? We're going to be asking all these questions next time.
So that's our show for now. Thank you for listening and for watching. I would like to point out to you that we have a web store online. You can buy a lot of books and stuff from Iceland, among them books by Valur and Gunnarsson, my co-host. For more information about the Reykjavik Grapevine, which makes and produces this podcast, go to www.grapevine.is. Goodbye. She actually taught me a song to go with it.
Okay.
Það mælti mín móðir að mér skildi kaupa fley og fagrar árar, standa upp í stafni, stýra dýrum heri. It's a weird thing to do with it.
It sounds too cheerful.
It's disturbingly cheerful.